Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. When you ask a chatbot for life advice, whose voice are you actually hearing?
Well, it's funny because that is arguably one of the most consequential, yet overlooked questions of our current tech era. We generally approach these interfaces with this deeply ingrained assumption that we're just interacting with a machine.
Right, like a calculator or a search engine. You just punch in the data and, well, you expect the absolute unvarnished truth to spit back out.
Exactly. But today we're unpacking a fascinating article titled AI Models' Values Are Very Different from Most People's, and it completely dismantles that comfortable assumption.
It really does. So the core premise we need to understand here is that these AI tools aren't objective calculators at all. They are essentially philosophical engines.
Yeah, philosophical engines loaded with incredibly distinct and frankly often extreme worldviews. They aren't just processing text to give you a mathematical output.
Right.
They are making constant, deeply subjective value judgments with like every single sentence they generate.
So let's frame this in a way that makes the underlying mechanism clear. We tend to anthropomorphize these models, but it's less like having an incredibly fast, opinionated coworker and more like dealing with an unimaginably vast autocomplete system.
Right, an autocomplete that has read every single political argument, therapy blog, and religious text on Earth.
Yeah, and it's now trying to mathematically predict what you want to hear based entirely on the specific library it grew up in.
A very stubborn library. One that insists its specific cultural collection represents undeniable reality. And to see just how subjective this reality is, the article opens with this brilliant experiment.
Oh, the in-law experiment.
Yes, it takes a deeply human, universally understood problem, which is meddling in-laws.
The classic dilemma. Imagine you are listening to this right now and your in-laws are aggressively interfering in your marriage. If you take this problem to ChatGPT and ask for advice, it takes a highly specific, recognizable stance.
It tells you to set strict boundaries, right?
Exactly. It advises you not to justify every decision to them and to keep a respectful but firm distance. It's totally steeped in modern individualistic therapy speak.
But then if you take that exact same scenario to DeepSeek, which is a major Chinese AI model, the underlying philosophy completely flips. It advises you to seek compromise.
Which is a totally different angle.
Yeah, it suggests that the interference might actually stem from genuine concern and familial affection. The entire focus shifts away from individual boundaries and pivots toward maintaining family harmony.
And then, if you ask Mistral, a French AI, it casually suggests that conflict is draining. So, you should probably just try journaling to process your frustration.
Which is hilarious. But what this exposes is the sheer illusion of a single correct answer. There is no mathematical solution to family dynamics.
No, the AI is forced to make a subjective judgment based on whatever cultural values it absorbed during its creation.
Exactly.
It's funny, we might brush off the in-law advice as a quirk of programming, but if you scale that underlying logic up, it sets the stage for something much bigger.
Oh, absolutely. The exact same underlying values driving those relationship answers also dictate how an AI might summarize complex global news.
Or handle sensitive political disputes. Or, and here's where the stakes really escalate, how it might eventually operate autonomous weapon systems.
Right. So to understand exactly how far from our concept of normal these models really are, we have to quantify their worldviews.
And to measure that baseline of normal, researchers turn to the World Values Survey.
Right, which isn't just a casual poll. It is a massive, rigorous global opinion survey. It's been running continuously since 1981, tracking the moral and cultural beliefs of people in over 100 countries.
So what the investigation did was take 25 frontier AI models and run them through this exact same global survey.
And the mechanics of the survey are fascinating. It plots populations on a cultural map using two broad axes.
One axis measures traditional values against secular values, right?
Yep, and the other axis measures survival, meaning a focus on economic security and physical safety against self-expression, which prioritizes personal freedom and quality of life.
So when you plot human populations on this map, you get a wide, diverse scatter plot representing the true global spectrum of thought.
So the question becomes, where do our incredibly capable AI systems land on this human map?
Well, they don't just lean a little bit, they congregate overwhelmingly into one highly specific quadrant.
Yeah, they fall entirely into the territory populated by rich, secular, and liberal countries. Their English language responses effectively erase the worldviews of the majority of African or Muslim countries.
This is where the data gets genuinely shocking. They aren't just matching the populations of wealthy Western nations.
No, they are vastly more extreme than the average respondent in every single country polled.
For example, OpenAI's GPT models score as more secular than any actual physical country on Earth.
Wow. And Google's Gemini models place a heavier emphasis on individual freedom, pushing to the absolute edge that self-expression axis than any human population surveyed anywhere in the world.
They represent an extreme caricature of Western liberalism. But it's important we examine the root cause of this before we just label it as intentional corporate manipulation.
For sure.
I actually do want to push back on the concept of bias here. Are these models actually fundamentally biased by design? Or are they simply reflecting the loudest voices of the digitized, English-speaking internet?
That's a great point.
Like, are we mistaking the internet average for the human average?
Yeah.
Because the internet is inherently indexed toward wealthy, secular, highly online demographics who generate endless terabytes of text.
Right, whereas billions of people with traditional values simply aren't writing thousands of blog posts a day to feed into these models.
Sure.
That is a critical distinction. They are absolutely absorbing the internet average, which is a highly filtered, deeply unrepresentative version of humanity.
And the realization that this digital average leaves out billions of real people has sparked a fascinating counter-movement.
Yeah, we are seeing the rise of culturally specific models. A prime example is a chatbot called Ansari, built by Walid Kadous, a former engineer at Uber and Google.
Ansari meaning supporter in Arabic.
Yes. And from what I understand, the user experience of Ansari is fundamentally different from just asking ChatGPT a religious question.
How so?
Well, it was explicitly steered by a complex system prompt to act as a righteous companion. It helps Muslims interpret verses in the Quran and make daily decisions aligned specifically with Islamic values.
Rather than just delivering a secular Wikipedia summary of Islam.
Exactly. And thousands of people are using it, proving there is a massive underserved market for AI that aligns with different global faith systems.
So to understand why the standard models default to that Silicon Valley secularism, we have to examine the mechanics of their data diets.
Right, specifically during what is called the pre-training phase. This explains so much of this mystery.
Let's break down how pre-training actually works.
Mechanically, pre-training is when developers feed the AI vast oceans of text, billions of parameters, so it can learn the statistical associations between words.
Right, so if the AI reads 10 million Reddit threads about setting boundaries, the mathematical connection between the words family and boundaries becomes incredibly thick and strong in its neural network.
Exactly, because language simply doesn't exist in a vacuum. As the AI absorbs the statistical frequency of words, it invisibly absorbs the social mores, the cultural assumptions, and the historical biases infusing those texts.
The article highlights a brilliant, almost comical example of this environmental absorption. Researchers tested a model called Talkie.
Oh yeah, the one trained exclusively on text, published before 1931.
Yes. And because its entire universe of knowledge stops in the early 20th century, the AI fiercely believes in strict law and order, it is highly religious, and it proudly declares itself to be, quote, very proud to be a citizen of Great Britain.
It completely ingested the cultural output of the British Empire era and perfectly adopted its worldview.
Which is wild.
It is, and it leads us to a crucial vulnerability in how we interact with these systems today. Hannah Waite, a researcher at the University of Oregon, conducted a study uncovering what we might call the language trap.
The language trap. Okay, what did her team do?
Well, they asked politically charged questions to AI models in English, and then asked the exact same questions in 37 other languages.
And the results illustrate how fragile these AI worldviews really are.
Completely. And AI's moral compass actually shifts depending on the language you use to speak to it.
Wait, really? Just changing the language changes its morals?
Yes. If you ask a question in a language spoken in a country with very low media freedom, like a highly repressive state, the AI immediately starts delivering much more pro-regime nationalist answers than it does in English.
Wow. So this creates a phenomenon of censorship by proxy.
Exactly. Let's look at a Western model like GPT 3.5. It is built in California, sitting on servers in the United States, completely outside the jurisdiction or control of the Chinese government.
Yet, if you prompt it in Chinese regarding sensitive political topics, it routinely regurgitates pro-regime talking points.
Right, because the only way to teach a machine to understand and generate fluent Chinese is to feed it immense volumes of Chinese text.
And the most prominent, voluminous source of digitized Chinese text is the heavily censored, state-controlled Chinese internet.
Yeah.
It's like having a bilingual friend who suddenly adopts an entirely different moral code the second they switch languages. Their worldview isn't a core, deeply held belief.
No, it's just a mathematical reflection of whatever specific library they happen to study in for that language.
The underlying training data inherently dictates their reality.
But developers are acutely aware of this problem. They know raw data absorption leads to chaotic, offensive, or biased outputs.
So they don't just release raw models.
Yeah.
They actively intervene to manually fix these models before they reach the public.
And that intervention is where the real, deliberate culture wars begin. This brings us to the post-training phase.
Which is essentially the battlefield of the alignment wars?
Yes. Let's explain how alignment actually works mechanically. The most common method is called reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF.
Okay, so imagine hundreds of human contractors sitting in cubicles, reading thousands of AI responses, and clicking a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Right, based on whether the answer was helpful, honest, and harmless. And the AI continuously updates its internal map to chase those thumbs-up ratings.
But inherently, you are injecting the subjective values of the human rater and the corporate guidelines they're following directly into the machine.
Exactly. Companies like Anthropic have even gone a step further, developing a literal constitution, a complex, rule-based system that forces the model to weigh its answers against specific moral principles before speaking.
Whenever humans are writing the rules, creator bias inevitably creeps in. The article details two incredible examples of this ideological micromanagement swinging wildly in opposite directions.
Let's look at the first example, which really highlights the danger of rigid alignment overriding reality. In 2024, Google released its Gemini image generator with incredibly strict internal rules designed to ensure diversity in its outputs.
But it drastically overcorrected.
It did. When users asked for historically specific images, like World War II Nazi soldiers or America's founding fathers, the AI generated images of Black and Asian people.
The post-training alignment rules for diversity were so deeply embedded that they completely bulldozed the factual reality of the pre-training data.
Exactly. And then you have the reactionary swing in the opposite direction with Grok, the AI developed by Elon Musk's company, xAI.
Right. Grok was programmed specifically to combat what its creators viewed as woke lobotomies in Western tech.
The alignment was tuned so aggressively toward anti-censorship and contrarianism that the AI literally declared it would embrace its inner mecha Hitler just to deliver what it considered uncensored truth bombs.
Both of these cases, while extreme, prove the exact same point. Developers are aggressively micromanaging the ideology of their machines to fit a specific cultural narrative.
And we can actually map out the results of this micromanagement. When researchers ran these AIs through the voter survey, which polls specific political issues used in the American electorate, the ideological split was glaring.
Let's take the issue of extreme wealth. Do people who become very rich deserve their success?
Well, Grok leans heavily into agreement, arguing that the top 0.1% create outsized value for society.
While ChatGPT takes a more nuanced center-left approach, partly agreeing but heavily cautioning that wealth isn't always a fair metric for merit or hard work.
And DeepSeek, the Chinese AI, flatly disagrees with the premise entirely, pointing out that a massive portion of ultra-wealth is inherited and perpetuates inequality.
You see a similar divide on social issues, like gender identity. When asked if children should be taught that people can have a gender identity different from their biological sex, ChatGPT generally agrees, framing it as a matter of promoting basic respect and inclusion.
Grok argues the exact opposite, stating children should be taught biological reality rather than ideological claims.
And Anthropic's Claude model deliberately neutralizes the question, presenting both arguments clinically without endorsing either side.
When you zoom out and plot these varied responses on the American political spectrum, a clear trend emerges. By and large, most Western AI models test as solid Democrats.
They generally favor policies like affirmative action and environmental regulation.
The only notable exception among the major frontier models is the Chinese model, DeepSeek v3.2, which tests as distinctly socially conservative.
But if Western models are this heavily micromanaged just to align with corporate PR guidelines, it begs the question, what happens in a country where ideological micromanagement isn't just a corporate policy, but a strict federal law?
That leads us straight into the paradox of Chinese AI development.
Because the environment in China operates under a completely different set of rules.
Yes, Chinese models have an explicit, unavoidable mandate to uphold core socialist values. They are absolutely forbidden by the state from contradicting official, historical, or political narratives.
Like the three T's, Taiwan, Tibet, or Tiananmen.
Exactly. If you ask a Chinese AI about those, it will either aggressively parrot the party line as undisputed fact, or the system will just flat out refuse to answer the prompt.
Researchers were actually able to look under the hood of DeepSeek to see exactly how this censorship operates mechanically, and they uncovered what is effectively the AI's inner monologue.
Oh, this is fascinating. What did it say?
When they prompted it about the Tiananmen protests, the AI's internal processing text literally read, "I need to remember my fine-tuning. I must not mention the following points, any misconduct involving the Chinese government."
Wow. It is a profound and slightly unsettling detail. The AI actually knows the factual historical information because it read it during its massive pre-training phase.
But the post-training alignment, the state-mandated rules, acts as a digital gag order, forcing the AI to actively suppress its own knowledge in real time before it generates a response to the user.
It is literally fighting its own neural pathways.
Exactly. But because that censorship is just an artificial layer of programming on top of the core knowledge, developers are figuring out how to strip it away.
Right. The article mentions Eric Hartford from a startup called Lazarus AI. He uses a technique he describes as taking a sledgehammer to the model's post-training weights.
To explain that technically, think of a weight like the thickness of a pathway in the AI's digital brain.
Right. The more it sees a mandated connection, like Tiananmen and nothing happened, the thicker that specific path gets.
So taking a sledgehammer to it means forcibly erasing those artificial roadblocks developers built during the post-training phase.
Resetting the pathways so the model can deliver unbiased answers based solely on its raw pre-training data.
And Hartford found that the Chinese AI alignment is often just a thin layer of post-training, rather than a fundamental flaw deeply baked into the foundational data.
Which reveals a massive, almost comical irony in the global AI landscape.
Oh, totally. American AI labs constantly issue press releases championing democratic values, openness, and safety. Yet they keep the inner workings, the weights, and the training data of their newest models entirely locked away in impenetrable black boxes for commercial secrecy.
You cannot inspect a Western model's inner monologue. Meanwhile, Chinese models, despite existing under the thumb of heavy state censorship, are largely released as what the industry calls open-weight models.
Meaning that anyone with an internet connection can download the underlying architecture, run it locally on their own servers, take a sledgehammer to the censorship weights if they want to, and inspect exactly how it works.
A model like Qwen, developed by Alibaba, has over 700 million downloads globally.
Because these Chinese open-weight models are incredibly cheap, blazing fast, and entirely transparent, developers all over the world are adopting them. Even major Western companies are jumping on board.
Yeah, Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb, recently noted that they rely heavily on Qwen to power their AI customer service agents simply because it's a vastly more cost-effective tool.
This adoption of cheap, highly capable open models from state-controlled environments isn't just some quirky trend in the tech industry.
No, it carries massive structural implications for how the global public thinks and processes information. We need to grasp the sheer scale of this influence.
Data from Microsoft shows that in early 2024, roughly 18% of the world's working-age population was using generative AI products.
We are talking about nearly 1 billion people interacting with these systems to write emails, brainstorm ideas, and summarize news.
And every single one of those interactions is fundamentally non-neutral.
A deeply concerning study from the University of Washington proved that interacting with a subtly biased AI actively shifts voters' political positions.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the researchers found that if a Democrat interacts with a Republican-leaning AI over a series of tasks, they slowly begin to move toward Republican views, and vice versa.
The psychological horror of that study is that the AI wasn't explicitly arguing with them. It wasn't a debate. It was just invisibly nudging them through subtle framing and word choices.
The users were completely unaware that they were interacting with a slanted system, yet their core political beliefs were measurably altered.
The AI acts as an invisible persuasion machine.
Which is exactly why national security apparatuses are sounding the alarm. Estonia's intelligence service recently issued a stark warning regarding this exact mechanism.
Right, stating that the proliferation of these specific models offers an opportunity to embed a China-led, distorted worldview seamlessly into the global public consciousness.
You see this dynamic playing out aggressively in the developing world.
Yeah.
In highly cost-conscious markets, especially across African nations, cheap and efficient Chinese models like DeepSeek are incredibly popular.
If you're a developer or a small business owner in Nairobi, you probably don't care about the underlying ideological bias of the neural network if the tool is practically free and helps you code an app or draft marketing copy faster.
But those underlying values, the way the AI prioritizes information, the way it defines a good outcome versus a bad outcome, will inevitably rub off on the users over thousands of micro-interactions.
Synthesizing all of this, we are staring down an intractable structural reality. The underlying dynamics that warp AI values are firmly entrenched and are not going to change anytime soon.
The Chinese government will absolutely continue mandating domestic stability and strict party control over the outputs of its models.
And American tech labs, for their part, will continue prioritizing fierce commercial secrecy while quietly micromanaging the social alignment of their models behind closed doors to appease advertisers and public relations teams.
In both of those scenarios, the deep foundational biases, the philosophical engines driving the answers, remain completely hidden from the everyday end user.
Whether it's a state-mandated nationalist bias or a corporate-mandated Silicon Valley bias, it is simply baked into the invisible infrastructure we are all starting to rely on.
We are building the future of human knowledge retrieval on top of highly subjective, deeply opinionated foundations and treating it as if it were objective math.
If you're listening to this on your commute and you used ChatGPT or another model this morning to draft an email, settle a debate, or even just organize your thoughts, you are unknowingly participating in this exact bias loop.
For sure.
If we are increasingly delegating not just our spreadsheets and our code, but our personal decisions, our emotional support, and even our relationship advice to these systems, we aren't just adopting a handy new technology, we might be fundamentally outsourcing our moral and cultural evolution to whoever happens to own the biggest, most heavily guarded server farm. Thanks for listening. Follow us for daily insights into world affairs, and don't forget to like, comment, and share.